Rome fell because it couldn't stop splitting itself apart. China watched that happen and decided that would never happen to them. Chinese thinkers asked a question. Why did this strong empire collapse? Because the thing is, China's been collapsing and rebuilding itself for thousands of years. They know exactly what it looks like when an empire dies. So, China has spent the last 1,000 years making sure they never make Rome's mistakes. Rome didn't just fall, it disintegrated. For over 1,000 years, Rome ruled more land than anyone thought possible. They built roads that connected 3 continents, created laws that shaped how we think about justice today. Their armies were so feared that just seeing Roman banners made enemies surrender. Then, in a single generation, it was gone. The Western Roman Empire collapsed in a way that shocked everyone who witnessed it. No massive final battle, no dramatic last stand, just the quiet end of what people called the Eternal City. According to historical records, the Roman Empire had been rotting from the inside for centuries. Corruption spread through every level of government. Between 235 and 284, Rome had 26 different emperors and 25 of them were assassinated. The survival rate as emperor was worse than playing Russian roulette. The economy was a disaster. Heavy taxation crushed the poor while the rich fled to their country estates. Inflation spiraled out of control. The military, once the pride of Rome, started hiring foreign mercenaries who had zero loyalty to the empire. Some of these mercenaries would later be the ones sacking Rome itself. Edward Gibbon, the famous historian who wrote about Rome's decline, claimed the fall was inevitable because of what he called immoderate greatness. Rome got too big, too corrupt, too disconnected from what made it strong in the first place. Prosperity planted the seeds of decay. But the part that matters most for this video is that Rome split itself. In 293, Emperor Diocletian divided the empire into 4 parts to make it easier to govern. Later, it became East and West. The 2 halves fought over resources. They argued over military support. The Greek-speaking East got richer while the Latin-speaking West crumbled. Division killed Rome. And thousands of miles away, Chinese scholars were taking notes. The ancient Chinese knew about Rome. They called it Dane, which literally means Great Qin. That's massive because Qin was the dynasty that first unified China. So calling Rome Great Qin meant they saw it as an equal. Another empire on the opposite side of the world, just as powerful, just as sophisticated. Chinese records from the Book of the Later Han described Deccan as a land with hundreds of cities, a king who lived near a great river and people who were tall and honest. They noted Rome's laws, customs, and currency with the kind of detail you reserve for someone you respect. There was even a supposed Roman embassy that reached the Hort in 166. Though historians debate if they were actual diplomats or just merchants claiming to represent Rome, the point is this. China paid attention. But China didn't just see Rome as a distant trading partner. Historical linguist Edwin Puleblanc explained that Chinese historians considered Deccan to be a kind of counter-China located at the opposite end of their known world. A mirror image, another great civilization that ruled vast territories and maintained order through sophisticated government. From a Chinese perspective, Rome's collapse wasn't shocking. It was predictable. Chinese civilization runs on a cycle called the dynastic cycle. It's been the operating system of Chinese politics for over 2,000 years. The pattern is burned into how Chinese people think about power, government, and history. Here's how it works. A new dynasty rises to power and gets the mandate of heaven. This is a complete philosophical framework that says heaven gives the right to rule to virtuous leaders. The new emperor distributes land to peasants, cuts taxes, and fights corruption. The first few generations are golden. But then slowly things change. The emperor gets disconnected from regular people. Corruption starts in distant provinces. Minor rebellions break out. The government takes land from peasants. Natural disasters strike, and the emperor can't or won't help. These disasters aren't random in the Chinese worldview. Floods, earthquakes, famines. These are heaven sending a message. Your ruler has lost his virtue. He no longer deserves the mandate. At this point, rebellion isn't just justified. It's necessary. It asks the people doing heaven's work by removing a corrupt ruler and replacing him with someone virtuous enough to restore order. Then the cycle repeats. New dynasty, new mandate, new golden age, inevitable decay, collapse, reunification under new leadership over and over again. The Shang dynasty fell this way. The Zhou dynasty fell this way. The Qin, the Han, the Tang, the Song, all of them followed this same brutal pattern. Rise, prosperity, corruption, collapse. So when Chinese scholars looked at Rome, they didn't see a mystery. They saw a dynasty that lost its mandate. Rome's collapse confirmed everything Chinese thinkers already believed about how empires fall. That administrative split became a permanent fracture, a wound that refused to close. Instead of acting as allies, the two halves became rivals, squandering precious resources on petty internal power struggles. Rather than fortifying borders or solving crises, China's takeaway was clear: never allow the empire to fragment. Any threat to central unity, whether a separatist movement or a regional warlord, is viewed not just as a political problem, but as the beginning of the end. Chinese history is haunted by eras like the Warring States or the Three Kingdoms, where the realm shattered into competing pieces. Those eras were absolute nightmares defined by relentless slaughter, total economic ruin, and staggering loss of life. National unity became a sacred doctrine not simply because rulers were obsessed with control, but because they knew from experience that division is a civilization killer. You only have to look at the period of disunion that followed the collapse of the Han Dynasty. It resulted in 3.5 centuries of unmitigated chaos. Lesson 2. The true threat is always internal. Yes, barbarians eventually sacked Rome, but they were just the final blow to a dying body. Alaric's Visigoths broke in 410, the Vandals followed in 455. By 476, Odoacer finished the job. But these invaders only succeeded because the Roman foundation had already turned to dust. Systemic corruption had hollowed out the state, while economic collapse left the legions underfunded and resentful. With no stable leadership to rally a defense, the empire was a hollow shell long before the gates were breached. This exact pattern haunts every single Chinese dynastic collapse. A dynasty doesn't fall because of the enemy at the gates, it falls because internal decay leaves the gates unguarded. This led Chinese thinkers to a vital conclusion: prioritize the prevention of internal rot. Demand honesty from the bureaucracy. Ensure the economy supports the many rather than the few. Maintain the right to rule through effective governance, not just the edge of a sword. This philosophy birthed China's obsessive systems of oversight, rotating officials, and rigorous internal audits to root out graft. They realized that a single corrupt official in a far-flung province is more than a nuisance. It's the first crack in the dam that drowns an entire civilization. Lesson 3. Collapse is moral failure. Rome lost legitimacy. The people stopped believing the empire deserved their loyalty. When your emperors are getting assassinated every few years, when inflation destroys savings, when barbarian mercenaries make up your army, why would anyone feel loyal? China framed this through the mandate of heaven. Collapse doesn't just happen. Rulers lose the mandate because they abandon virtue. They stop caring about the people. They let corruption flourish. They fail to respond to disasters. Natural disasters, floods, earthquakes, famines. These weren't just bad luck in the Chinese worldview. They were heaven's way of saying, your ruler has failed. If the emperor doesn't fix his behavior, rebellion is coming and it's justified. This created a weird kind of accountability. Chinese emperors couldn't just blame bad luck or external enemies when things went wrong. They were expected to take moral responsibility. Sometimes they would issue public apologies or perform rituals to show they understood they'd lost heaven's favor. Lesson 4. Barbarian invasion is a symptom, not a cause. Rome got invaded by Germanic tribes, but those tribes had been on Rome's borders for centuries. What changed wasn't that the barbarians got stronger. It's that Rome got weaker. China saw this pattern in their own history. The nomadic peoples to the north, the Xiongnu, the Mongols, the Mongols. They invaded when Chinese dynasties were weak. Strong dynasties could defend the borders or even turn these groups into allies. The real danger wasn't the barbarians. It was the internal weakness that made barbarian invasion possible. Fast forward to today. China is still following these lessons. The Chinese Communist Party studies the collapse of empires like it's a survival manual. When the Soviet Union fell in 1991, the CCP didn't celebrate. They panicked. They generated tens of thousands of internal papers analyzing what went wrong. Their conclusion: the Soviet Union collapsed because it abandoned these same principles. It let the party become corrupt and disconnected from the people. It allowed ethnic divisions to weaken central authority. It lost ideological legitimacy. Xi Jinping has been particularly obsessed with this. In a leaked speech from 2012, Xi Jinping asked party officials, "Why did the Soviet Union disintegrate?" His answer echoes the lessons from Rome. Internal decay, loss of legitimacy, failure to maintain unity. This explains China's modern policies that confuse outsiders, the extreme focus on national unity, and the harsh response to any separatist movements in Tibet, Xinjiang, or Taiwan. This isn't random authoritarianism. It's following the lesson that division killed Rome and has destroyed China multiple times. Yes, they're also about consolidating power, but they're also about preventing the internal rot that toppled every dynasty and empire before. The emphasis on what the CCP calls performance legitimacy, delivering economic growth, reducing poverty, responding to disasters. The government maintains legitimacy by improving people's lives, not just through ideology or force. China sees these as modern versions of the ideological decay that weakened both Rome and the Soviet Union. Western empires throughout history focused on external expansion and external threats. Build bigger armies, conquer more land, defend the borders. Chinese dynasties focused on internal cohesion and internal threats. Keep the bureaucracy clean. Prevent warlords from getting too powerful. Make sure the economy works. Respond to famines and floods. Maintain ideological unity. It's because their history taught them a brutal lesson. Internal decay weakened the dynasty until external pressures or rebellions could finish it off. The external stuff was just the final blow to an already dying patient. Rome proved this pattern wasn't unique to China. It was universal. Any empire, no matter how powerful, will collapse if it rots from within. If you want to see more videos on nations' history, subscribe to wait for the next video. Thanks for watching.